What up, everybody? Welcome to Party Science. I'm here with David Martiroso. I met this guy at Keller Williams, and I was completely blown away. One, because he was super down to earth when I got to speak to him at the end of the event. And not even that, the 2 years that I was at this event doing social media for Party Excitement, each time he was the guy. I don't know if you can see all these bats back here, but basically he's the guy who gets shit done. He was always the guy going up for awards, not just him, his whole team. And it just showed me that this was a guy of leadership. He really cared about getting to work, getting the results he promised people, and just making sure he always tried to do his best in that direction. So I'm glad that he's given me his time today to be here to speak with him. So David, thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate you being here today with me, man.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so I sent you over some questions, but genuinely after looking at your LinkedIn, I want to know, so you have kids, so we were talking about it a little bit before.
hmm
And you talked about how your son was a motivator to want to get financial freedom. You wanted to go out there and do it. But when we spoke at Keller Williams, you told me in the beginning how it was completely different than that. Right? So if you can just kind of walk me through how you got started in the industry, you, your brother, now your sister as well,
Yep.
and how it eventually got to the point where you have the financial freedom or the at least the time capability to spend
hmm
more time with your son and do the things that you want to do.
Yeah, so the way we got started in the real estate space was we were trying to buy my father a house. Prior to that, I had regular jobs. I was an auto body technician, I was a barber for a long time. Um, and earlier in my years, I immigrated to America. So when my son was born, obviously I got into this business. But one thing we tried to do in 2009, we tried to buy my dad a house. I really wanted to buy my dad a house. That was like the American dream for me. We never got around to it. But what happened was when we started shopping for real estate, we got rotated about 5 different realtors. To their defense, we weren't qualified as buyers. And then what happened was I just told my brother, hey, why don't we get into it? We'll actually be able to help people um, get the things that they want as far as real estate goes. And you always hear how realtors make a lot of money. And he said, no, let's just get into investments. And I ended up convincing him to get into it. And that's how we got started as realtors. That was the beginning, and that was in 2009.
Nice. So was that when DNA Realty started, or what was the?
No, in the beginning of our career, we worked for a bunch of different real estate companies. We didn't have the name DNA Realty Group probably until 4 or 5 years into it. When I was cutting hair at the barber shop, we came up with a logo. I still have a picture of the original logo that we drew up at the time, and we were trying to come up with a name that would just represent us, right? So DNA Realty Group, I thought I always wanted to expand my team at some point in the future, and I thought they can always say DNA Realty Group. It's like in our blood to sell real estate.
Oh, nice.
But my sister, who wasn't in the business, her name is Nutella. So it's David Nutella Arthur for ourselves,
Okay,
to use
nice.
the name as well.
That's
And
cool.
and that's kind of how we came up with the name.
It's a very much like a play on letters there. I like it. I
Yeah,
like it.
yeah.
Um, so now you're working with your brother
hmm
and now your sister.
hmm
And I guess at this point, you've been able to kind of like get some bumps and bruises in the game and kind of figure out how to help guide people to have success, whether they hire you as a realtor to buy a home or if they join your team to actually, sell
hmm
themselves.
hmm
So I guess to kind of get into it, what would you say was one of the biggest lessons you've had in being in this since you've started? Like if you had to start all over again and do this
hmm
again, what would be like the one lesson you would take with you to do it and from zero?
Yeah, like if I were to do it again, and I would honestly try to turn up the volume year one. I think the biggest lesson for me was you really obviously have to work hard, but I think it's like just don't quit. And then the most important lesson for me would be I try to think what changed my life outside of motivations like my son being born, and now, I have to do different things. I didn't want to be the same person I was. It's just like this like constant and never ending improvement. I work on myself all the time. Like people would not believe. I'm reading, I'm studying, I'm going to seminars, and like that's a thing I've never stopped. And I think that's the biggest lesson that separates myself and probably some of my peers previously. If one of us goes home and we watch a 2-hour movie, I'm going home and I'm reading and I'm studying and I'm watching 2-hour YouTube videos of just something that's like I'm trying to learn. And if somebody's listening to music, and then I basically don't listen to music for the most part. Music is my commercial. Most of the time I'm listening to audiobooks. And I think, if I always think I'm not the smartest person in the room, and if my retention is 5 to 10%, well, I have to learn so much more so that I retain that stuff and internalize it. So I guess learning would be learning based.
Okay. Yeah, it was when I was looking at your LinkedIn videos, you had mentioned something about one of your favorite quotes was, "If you need a helping hand, look down at your wrist
Yeah.
and um, get to work." It was kind of like the idea of like you can do it, you can get it done. So um, now having gone through all these years of lessons
Hmm.
and being to where you are now, what kind of keeps you motivated on a day to day? Because you've achieved some of the things you dreamt about when you didn't have any of this,
Right.
and now you're here. We're in an office, nice natural light. It's in one of the back rooms. We got the bats hanging out. You seem to have gotten to a point where you could be very comfortable if you wanted, right? Like you don't have to continue growing and doing the things that you want to do.
Hmm.
So, what is it that motivates you now to keep going?
So obviously, I've hit a stride, and I do have a comfortable life, if we want to call it that. Like my bills are paid; they're probably more than paid. My kid can have almost anything he wants, and so can I, and so can my family. But I don't think I hit it to the level where it's like gazillions of dollars, which is what I came for, and that's where
Nice,
I'm going. So,
nice, nice.
so over time, it just gets bigger. How I also think outside of myself is, the better I get, right, the more everybody around me has to get better. And if I keep getting better, they don't have an excuse. And that's how I think, because if I'm constantly improving, everybody around me has to improve or they fall away. And I really strongly believe that, so that's just what I'm doing. I just have really big goals. I have this internal drive, probably because I immigrated to America, and this is, the land of opportunity. And let's face it, I want to make money and I want to live good. After the bills got paid and the gas is filled and I don't care about flat tires anymore, now I really want to go and pursue my dreams. I want, the biggest house so I could throw the biggest parties,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
could have fun with my friends and family. And I just want to grow financially and emotionally and spiritually. But that's kind of what drives me, like how much more can we get? How much bigger can I dream? And how much bigger can I actually progress forward? And can I do it faster? That's how I think.
Nice. So now you were talking about audiobooks and kind of that being your focus. Is there one that you recommend to your team? Is there one you're listening to? Like I'm a big audio guy
Hmm.
as well.
Hmm.
So I'm always kind of curious to see what people are reading and kind of what got them to that material.
Hmm.
So what is it that you might recommend to somebody if you're recommending an audiobook for the first time?
Yeah.
And then is there one you recommend to your team?
Yeah, so I say read and study everything. I try not to make crazy recommendations because I think everybody's at their own journey. So whatever books and things fall on your lap at the time, at the level you're at, is probably what you should be listening to. Obviously, the classics like Think and Grow Rich. I have a bunch of real estate books here. My team and I just finished reading The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. I like the book The Energy Bus. I like I like Jim Rohn, Les Brown. I've been to Tony Robbins seminars, T. Harv Eker seminars. So almost like anything anybody would name, I've spent a significant amount of times listening to those people. And I always look at everyone that is a teacher, past, present, or future, like they're my brothers and my sisters and my cousins and fathers and mothers, and they're teaching me
Right.
things. So I pay attention. And obviously, I don't always agree with everything they say, but man, there's so much good information out there. So I try my best to just constantly learn from anything that's remotely positive and influential towards just having a good mindset and a good heart set and just being a good headspace and emotional space. So just like everything. If it's a book and it's decent, I'll read it. Even if it's not decent, I'll read it just because you could learn something.
Right.
Know?
Yeah. There's definitely a gem in everything if you take the time to kind of dissect it. Yeah.
Right.
So what was the first audiobook you heard? Like what was the first one that you got a hold of at the right place at the right time?
Yeah, I don't know which one I first heard, but I could tell you which one flipped the script. We used to live in a housing complex in Arlington. That's where we were on food stamps and stuff. And my brother, right after I got out of high school, I was doing kind of like derogatory things. And my brother came to me with a book for like 8 months. And he'd be like, you got to read this book. You got to read this book. And it was like a Dean Graziosi book on real estate. And I'm telling him, he's my younger brother, so I'm like, get out of my face. I have my own plans of things I'm going to do.
Right.
When I picked up that book, that year, I ended up reading like 23 books. I went to high school, I was on a 5-year plan, so like
I gotcha.
reading books was not on the radar for me.
Right.
But then I think that year just something flipped, and then I just never stopped learning. That was the first book. Yeah, I don't even remember the name of the book, but it was like a Dean Graziosi book on real estate.
So it was real estate. That was kind of like the first. Okay.
Yeah, it was.
See,
real
when you
estate.
said Think and Grow Rich, I thought you were going to say something in like that direction maybe,
No,
and then
it
you
was
fell
like
into
a
real
real
estate.
investing book, and
Nice.
that's kind of how that went.
That's cool. Okay. So we have your brother on your team, your sister just joined. Now, how do you, as being the oldest, seem from what I just understood, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of manage being siblings plus working, and then have you set up like certain ways of communicating while you're at work to make sure everybody's executing on what they need to do,
Mm-hmm.
and when you're outside of work, then it's completely different? Or how do you function on a day-to-day working with your siblings?
Yeah, so me and my brother and I'm the middle child.
Okay, all right,
Okay,
gotcha.
and I act accordingly.
Okay.
My brother, my sister, and myself are super close because, culturally, we're Armenian, right?
Okay.
And the way we grew up was my mom passed from breast cancer when I was 9 years old. Before I moved to America, my sister was 11, my brother was 7, and we always had each other. Like we were always close. The family environment, the way I grow up, is like you might fight with your family, but it's your family forever and you take care of them. I think life circumstances just forced us to be there for each other and always have each other's back, so that never changed. As far as how we are at work, it's really not any different, meaning I could see them at work, we work together all day, every day, and then I might end up at their house at night and we're hanging around watching a movie. Or people joke that we're always on the phone like 24/7. People joke like, oh, did you talk to your siblings today? We talk all the time, and I don't see that I get tired of it or they get tired of it. It's like we just love each other.
Nice.
And we've always been close, and it's always been like this our whole life.
Yeah. So you guys had a bond that was almost strengthened because of something that was very tragic. You know what I mean? And I'm sorry, to hear that, but it seems like you use that as a factor to really keep you guys together and keep driving forward. You know, I mean, you could have easily folded at, you know, a very young, 9 years old is what you said. You could have
Yeah.
easily folded at that point and gone in the wrong direction, and all of your siblings had a falling out. So
Yeah.
to hear that you've gotten tighter and built something that's even, you know, I'm sure you didn't even dream of that. You only thought it was so, and correct me if I'm wrong, you know, this is all speculation, but just from
Hmm.
the conversations we've had, it always kind of seemed far away
Yeah.
until eventually the hard work just kind of rolled
Yeah,
over.
I think it's hard to explain in like such a short interview, right? We would have to really dissect all the years. But as a young teen, I was really lost, meaning like I was just doing things I couldn't even tell you. It was just like crazy things from just everything to do with just like everything you would do if you were a bad person,
Mm.
and I had bad intentions. I still wanted to make money, but in different ways. I was very on edge all the time, and I went through my dark years as a young man. I had horrible relationships. Just a lot of things didn't work out for me, and I think the way I look at it is I'm actually pretty lucky in that regard. Some people, things work out great for them, and then later on, things go bad. For me, like nothing worked as far as I could see, and and now at 39 years old, things are starting to come around big time.
Mm.
But if you think about it, I worked on myself all those years. But the biggest thing that flipped the switch for me was my kid was born. I don't know how my life would have turned out if he wasn't born. I don't know what kind of person I would be if my mother was still alive. I don't know what kind of person I would be if like my dad didn't do the things that he did or didn't do, you know. And I just kind of take all that and look at it as this is my life and this is what is helping me move forward. And sometimes some people look back and they think like, whoa, it's me and life sucks and this sucks that it happened to me. But you might not want something else to happen to you because, you know, if my mom was alive, I would have probably been a different person. I don't know if that would have been good, better, or worse, but it would have been a different situation. And I accept my life for whatever it is that comes my way.
Mm. I mean, that makes complete sense, man. Like, as you look at where you are now and you slowly describe kind of what your background is, it it all makes sense on why you're sitting in this office doing what you're doing, you know, having what you have. So, I guess having that connection with them, being here and learning everything you've learned, I'm trying to phrase this properly. I'm not sure. Like, you know, when you have an idea and it's kind of like
Yeah.
formulated.
Yep.
So, I guess now as you're doing it all and you're trying to teach everyone to have similar successes as you,
Hmm.
right? And you're trying to navigate them through all these things between inflation and interest rates and things like that. Where do you kind of start with someone new? Like, where do you, like, if someone was coming to you saying, like, hey, man, I'm interested in this thing, and you
Hmm.
want to gauge on how serious they are in terms of actually dedicating themselves part time, full time, you
Hmm.
know, making the phone calls, actually doing the work that you need, whether, you know, you're really serious or part time. Um, how do you walk somebody through that beginning?
So in the beginning, like real estate career, sales career type of deal, in the beginning you really have to work, and there's so much that people don't know that they act like they know, you know. So I think like humble. In the first 7 years of our career, we literally ended up in a one-bedroom apartment, my brother and I, getting evicted because we couldn't pay the bills for 6 months. And my son was 4 and 3 at the time, and the only thing I could think is like, I'm such an idiot for being in this business. So sales and just business in general kind of makes you want to quit, especially in the beginning, because in the beginning nothing works. Like, I don't care who you are, especially if you don't have the right guidance and you're just beating your head against the brick wall trying to figure it out. Nothing's working. So I think it's longevity, time on task over time. And you know, when I first started, I wanted to make 100,000. I never made 100,000 for the first 7 years. And when we made 100,000, it was almost to the point I was like, is this ever gonna happen? But then when it happened, we made 300,000, and then we made 400 and 500, and then like it progressively went up, and it's kind of crazy. Um, there's a quote, I think it's in Think and Grow Rich, that basically says like, you know, when you become abundant and money starts to pour in, it pours in so fast that the only question you ask yourself is like, where has it been all the lean years? And that's how I think it is. It's like it's growing and you just don't understand that if you stop, the roots are still underground. And if you stop, they'll never come to fruition.
Hmm.
And I always joke, my brother and I never wanted to quit on the same day. So I guess we're lucky with that.
Yeah, I guess it worked out. Okay, so then for you now, what does like a day to day look like for you? You know, now you're, are you still doing a lot of what you did early on to keep yourself going? What
Hmm.
is like a
Hmm.
day in the life of David look like?
Yeah, so I'm usually out from work standpoint, or my life standpoint. I'm usually either with my family. I still love spending time with my family. I love spending time with my son. That's very important to me, and I always did that when I was broke or not, because I always thought like, you cannot, no amount of money can buy time, right? If you
Right.
take Steve Jobs, he's 52, had more money than all of us, couldn't buy another day, and I could spend my time for free with my kid even if I'm broke. So I never forgot that. I always spent quality time with family. So I prioritize that. As far as my work schedule, it's like I show up to work, make calls, do my follow-ups. I go on appointments. I'm always looking for listings. I'm looking for investments for myself. As the years went on and we saved money, I started doing investments and investing in real estate and flips and this and different things like that. But the priority of what got me here was real estate sales, and I'm still very much passionate and focused into the business. I can't tell you like how many houses I've sold where they had twins and they they got bigger houses and then they got investment properties and then they sold them and they retired. Like all these stories of all these people, and I genuinely feel like I have a little piece to do with their like life journey,
Yeah, yeah.
and it still hypes me up a lot.
Nice. So it's like it's almost like a rush, like that dopamine rush that you
Yeah.
say, you know what I mean? Like the runner's high almost, kind of like always being on the grind, helping someone achieve what they're trying to achieve and being there with them.
Yeah,
That's dope.
our it's like our company mission is transforming lives through real estate, and that's what we do. We're helping people change their life. Like if you met me through real estate, and I help you with real estate, and we become friends, but the ideology is like we started that relationship through my real estate business, more or less. And it's kind of how I met a lot of people, but we're transforming lives through the vehicle of real estate.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So what was that first investment like for you? I love the Monopoly cards on the backboard, by the way. I have to grab a
Yeah.
photo of that before, but um, I would think that I have friends who talk about investments, but they haven't really taken that step.
Hmm.
So, what was it like for you, that first step? Like, were you nervous? Did you already know kind of what you were walking into? Was,
Yeah.
the shell, that whole deal, like walk us through that. Like, what
Yeah.
was that like?
So I never owned a piece of real estate until 2019. That's 4 years ago. So
Hmm.
talking all this crazy things that I'm on my way to achieving. I've never owned a house till 2019. As a matter of fact, in 2017 and 16, I was still having some hard times paying some of the bills. I've been saving money the whole time. My first condo I bought was in North Andover. I put 20% down. It was like $200,000 condo. Making my cold calls. It was for sale by owner. He didn't want to hire a realtor, so I ended up buying the property. That was cool because that stopped me from renting. That was super huge for me. Then my brother and I saved more money. We bought another building. That building was approximately $1 million. We put 20% down on that. went through like a lot of rough patches, and it stabilized in about 2 years, and then it started spitting out um, like a little over 10,000 a month, so that thing's generating money. Then we
Now these
had,
are all multi-unit properties, I'm
yeah,
assuming, that
the
you're talking
first
about?
one was just a condo. I
Right.
still lived there.
And you just bought the property from the guy who was selling it because he didn't
hmm
want. Okay.
And the second one was a multi-unit, it was a four family, and then we bought another three family, and we bought, like, yeah, it was scary, but I've been in the real estate space for almost 11 years before I bought a house. So it was scary, but it also wasn't scary because I like just been in it for so long.
Right.
I've seen people fail. I've seen people lose money. I know what to do and I know what not to do. I would
Right.
say personally, I'm a very safe player. I'm a
Mm.
super saver. So it's like rule number one, right? Don't don't lose money. And rule number two is don't forget rule
The
number
number one.
one.
Yeah, yeah. Great rule, bro.
Yeah,
Great rules.
so
Uh, yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
mhm.
Um, okay, so now is like what's the next investment look like for you? You've done the $1 million property, you've done the condo, you have the multifamily homes.
Mhm.
So now, as we're kind of laying out the next like big thing that you're trying to achieve, what is it that you kind of have your eye on?
So growing my team, like my real estate business, is important to me. Buying enough properties, like I'm always looking, I'm always trying to buy more. And obviously, like outside of my investment properties, I had some really good like renovation projects that paid out big for me.
Nice.
And my next step is to get more properties, bigger buildings, see how far we could take that, and also grow my business in real estate. And then I believe eventually I truly want to start buying other businesses, like in other business spaces that may or may not be related to real estate. The idea that some people are making like hundreds of millions of dollars is cool to me, and like I want to see if I could get there too.
Yeah, yeah, wholeheartedly, man. I understand that. So now, when it comes to the the actual part of someone buying a home
hmm
and coming to you and talking to you about it, what do you think the best questions to ask a realtor is during that first appearance of like meeting with somebody to kind of help them get on the right foot? Like, what should they ask you? Like, what should be their main concern as someone who's looking to buy a
Yeah,
property?
yeah, like you know, I think their main concern should be their finances, their debts, like how much debt should I have? How much debt should I pay off? How much money should I save? What kind of property they should buy? But I think more or less all real estate comes down to pretty simple things like pay off all your debt, save as much money as possible because the bigger the down payment, the better the terms sometimes, and just do it the slow and the steady way, which is like, some people try to just get in, like, I gotta buy a house and they're itching. But just pay attention to where you are in your life, how much savings you have. Are you doing it as an individual? Are you doing it with a life partner? And I think that you just have to budget and strategize. But overall, buying real estate's pretty easy. It's like save a down payment, make sure your credit is good, and go get the house, you
Right,
know?
right, right. Now, when you're working with someone to get a home
hmm
and they've approached you, you've kind of gone over their goals, their finances, things like that. Now, do you help them find the home, or do they normally come to you with a home they have in mind? Do they give you an area? Like, what would be the most beneficial to help them get the process along once they've gone the slow route, saved it, gotten to the point where they know they can pay the home, their
hmm
finances are in a position where they're good? How do you help them find the home from that point forward?
Yeah.
Or, what would help the process move?
So I have buyers that have been looking for like 2 years, 3 years. I have buyers that come in and buy a house within 4 months or 3 months or
Nice.
8 months.
Right.
The biggest difference is like if you think about it, you could live in many houses. So just the areas where you'd really want to be and just being realistic about what you can afford, I think is very important. And then just this idea that there is no perfect house. A lot of people think, like, I'm waiting for this absolute perfect house that checks off all the boxes. And I just think you could live in this house or you could live in this house and you'd probably be happy in both. So it's what is the right house for you right now? And if the average person stays in their house for like 3 to 7 years, you got to think as many times as most people move in their lifetime, like how many you might move 3 or 4 major houses as far as your personal residence goes. So just know it's not a forever. It's just what is the best house for me right now.
Right, given my current situation.
Right.
Right, okay. Okay. So we've got the home, we've kind of got the plan. What do you, when you get to those like final steps of walking somebody in there about to get the key, is there certain things you try to make sure they look at in a home that they might be interested in that maybe you weren't the one to introduce them to, but they found before they, sign the dotted line because they have everything before? Like, what should they look at in a home that would be like red flags to you that they might miss?
Yeah, so I think maybe the upkeep of every house is different, right? So if the roof is old, if the mechanicals are old, like the furnace, the water heaters, the electrical, so you have to constantly look at that because, when you buy a property, the bigger the house, the bigger the maintenance cost. Right? So it's not just the house you're buying. If you buy a house and it has a giant yard, like who are you going to pay to take care of that yard? If there's a giant driveway, like who's cleaning the driveway? You, which is your time, or you're paying somebody, right? So I just think that's important to consider. What kind of house you're buying and what kind of maintenance might be associated with it, right?
Okay.
So like, for instance, I'm in a condo. My condo association cleans up the snow.
Right.
I hate cleaning snow. So I just walk in and out of my house and I watch a bunch of people clean my snow, right? So it just depends on what you're buying and how you want to live, right? And if you have a single family, just be able to afford what it is for maintenance costs. So like, you're going to have a giant yard, somebody's got to clean that. You're going to have a furnace break, that's going to be a certain amount of money. So always put money away because you ever seen a house that's not kept?
Yeah.
They deteriorate,
Yeah.
right? The exterior might need to be painted, the deck might need to be painted. So you just have to consider that it's not just your mortgage payment.
Right. Okay. So when it comes to your business now, right? And it looks like you've gotten to the point where like your network, people know who you are in terms of like you'll be able to get them what they're looking for, the best possible close thing to it. How do you predominantly promote yourself now? Is it social media? Is it word of mouth? Are you doing networking events? Like, what do you find is the most efficient way to get the next person who's interested in a home in front of you?
Yeah. So most of my business now is sphere of influence, which is like people I know that like me, trust me, they send people to me because I've been doing it for 15 years. So there's longevity in that. I built my business on cold calling. And if you came in here earlier today, I was in here cold calling.
Smashing phones. I like it, man.
So
I like it.
I still do that, right? That's like the hard part of getting business. Now, obviously that we have money, I also do marketing, right? I do advertising of different sorts. I do a lot of social media, which is a new thing. I've always done it, but now I do it very intently, meaning like I'm doing it all the time. And I've actually gotten people that came to me that reached out through social media and now became clients and friends.
Nice.
So I get my business many ways, but mostly I was always a prospecting based person, meaning I'm out there door knocking, canvassing, just doing the hard work. And now it's like I'm marketing enhanced, right? So I have some money in my pocket where I can deploy my money to work for me.
Right.
You know, obviously, like money makes money, but I still do the hard work that I think people would not want to do because, you know, I still cold call and like, you know, some lady told me to F off earlier today.
But that's the thick skin, right? Like you've built it over so many years, or like you've heard that so many times at this point. It's almost like a good giggle that you get out of it at this point, I would assume, right? You laugh at that shit, so.
Yeah, I look at newer agents on my team and in the field that I try to teach them to not take it so personally,
Yeah.
and you know, they really like crumple when somebody says
Uh-huh.
something mean, and rightfully so. And I just don't even, I hear it, but it just does not bother me. But I
Right.
mean, I've been 15 years of just doing it, you know. And I think for people are kind of funny in a weird way. You call a mean person, they're mean to me, they're mean to you, they're mean to the guy in the car next to them. You call a nice person, they're nice to me, they're nice.
Right.
So it's just like, it's not necessarily you and what you're doing, it's like the person you called.
Right, right. They'd be that way to everybody else as well. It's not
Yeah.
just you. Yeah.
So that's how I like make it easier in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I I used to do door to door sales,
Mm-hmm.
so I get that cold prospect where like they're not expecting you to show up, they're not expecting any like this moment at all, and you somehow have to get them interested in what you're doing in that split second, or their attention to you is, hey, fuck off,
Right.
you know, this is
Right.
my time, or yeah, I don't have time for you, sorry, you know. So I definitely appreciate the cold calling. I think it's one of the least used things amongst people who do sales. Like I used to do 100 calls a day. That was always the goal when I did sales. I was like, if I don't make 100 calls, whether they pick up or not, I left a message, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I had to ring 100 different numbers that day
Yeah.
for me to feel like, all right, bro, you did your work today. Like you were
Mm-hmm.
good. So it's it's one of those things that I feel someone like yourself appreciates because you know if you can get that cold person to become more market and then they refer you to one person who refers you, all of a sudden that one phone call turns into 10, 20, 30 houses down the line. So it's very interesting to hear that someone like yourself who, you know, I listened to the videos you had on LinkedIn and hear kind of where you're at with your dividends and your homes from what you've shared with people.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear that you're still doing that is very much like oh, okay, that fucking makes complete sense. Like the guy went one, he said, this is how I've made it. This is how I know I'm going to continue to make it, and I'll add things, but I'm not getting away from my bread and butter. So it's like, it's cool to hear.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this then. A lot of people now, when they look at homes, right, it's the interest rate or inflation or these things that they're throwing around. And I've gone back and forth on both, and I feel like the best time to buy a home is always at the availability that you have to buy a home. You shouldn't really wait too much longer
Mm-hmm.
because you can wait for interest rates to go down, but more than likely, if you get into a property and you're smart about what property you get into, the value of the home is going to go up higher than the interest rate is going to get down to the point where you can actually feel like, oh, I got the right interest rate.
Right.
So someone for yourself who's might be experiencing, or I don't know if you are, but I feel like those are the conversations I have with my friends as we're talking about homes. What advice would you give to someone who's in the market who's kind of on the line of like, do I buy a home now? Do I not buy a home
Mm-hmm.
now? And what should they be thinking about
Yeah.
realistically?
So in the short term, they should be thinking exactly what they're thinking because that's just how we think, right? In the long term, if you look at 30 years, right, there's not a house in the United States that is worth less 30 years later,
Right, yeah.
right? If you talk to older people, which in my business I run into them a lot and I see the mistakes they make with their real estate and I see what they do right with their real estate, and I hear a lot of people that say, oh, you don't know, my interest rate was, 14%, right, when I bought a property. And the pay at the time was $200 a week, and I made it work. And all those houses and all those people, for the most part, are very well off in the equity in the property.
Right.
So, okay, let's take the current times. Right now, we're lingering around 7%.
Right.
They say that it's more of your income is now going towards a mortgage if you bought a house. Okay, so let's take a person who's going to buy a house now versus who's going to wait 5 years.
Sure.
One buys a house now and they have to pay for it, right? and that's going to be problematic for some people because you got to work to pay that mortgage.
Right, right.
One person doesn't buy a house and they just wait. They're just like, I'm waiting until interest rates are 3% or
Sure,
5%,
yeah. Right.
whatever their best number in their head is,
Right.
right? Well, that house, if it's a $200,000 property, might appreciate at $20,000 a year, right?
Hmm.
If it's $1 million property, it could appreciate at $80,000 to $100,000 a month, right?
Right.
So you're missing out on that appreciation.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about one of my buildings. We bought it for $1 million. If I went to go sell it to you right now in the condition that it's in, I could probably get like 1.4.
Nice.
So that's 400,000 in appreciation in 3 years. I didn't necessarily cash that out, but had I never bought the property, yeah, I would have had my money in my pocket. I wouldn't have had the problems of owning real estate, and I also wouldn't have had the appreciation of the real estate. Now, if I hold that building for 20 years, in 20 years, let's say it's worth $2 million or $3 million, whatever it is, but that $2 million can come back to me, and plus I get rental income, But if it's just a single family, it's the same thing. If you take my condo, I bought it for $200,000. Let's say now it's worth $350,000. My mortgage is about $130,000, and I'm done, right? Now I have a $200,000 delta that I can then deploy to do other things with.
Sure.
On top of my working regular income, right? So meaning you're still going to work, right? So I always think like buy real estate and wait is the quote I like. If you can afford it and you could do it right, I would just do it because it's not like you're going to get rich in a day, but it'll help.
Sure. Yeah. Now, when it comes to real estate, is there certain areas that you find yourself recommending more than others when it comes to watching appreciation on the home rise? Is there, I would assume obviously areas towards Boston are, much more expensive, that grows much faster. Like if you had to give like a sweet spot to the average person that you could say like, hey, buying a home here, like might be a good idea, these spots right here are the ones you should go to. Like what is like places that you would recommend in terms of cities or towns that you think are good?
Yeah. Some areas, obviously, in the whole country, there's some places that don't appreciate much or appreciate very little. We're in Boston, which is an amazing place to be, right? And our values just keep going up. I think as long as you're close to Boston, you're probably good. But for the most part, in the city, they may appreciate a little higher, right? The closer you are to the city. But, I mean, you could go as far as all the way to Worcester, and those properties are still going up in value, right? I know I have friends that, one of my properties is in the city, and it went up $300,000 in a year.
Nice.
So, just be where people want to be, for the most part, is how I would look at it. So, if you are close to the city and there's jobs and it's a good area with like there's some towns when you tell people where you live and they go, oh, right?
Yeah.
You could live in a shack.
Yeah.
But if you drop the town's name, they're like, oh, that's a nice town.
Right.
If you buy in those towns, you should be good to go on appreciation,
Right.
And if you don't want to play the appreciation game, you can buy in areas where maybe the appreciation's not as big, but if you buy investment properties, you might still get way better cash flow.
Right, from the actual property or the rentals and things like that. Okay.
So I would just say, like, generally the areas that are, if you think it's nice, other people think it's nice, like, I'd go there.
Yeah. Right. Now, when you look at a realtor's lens, right? You're looking at it like, how can I sell versus how can I buy? What is the thing that you believe has the biggest opportunity in a home? Like when you're buying a home or you're working with someone to buy a home, what do you see as like something that might be a part of a home that most average person might not necessarily view as valuable, but because you've dealt with so many homes, you're like, hey, having, this much land or this specific type of furniture, or things like that. Like, what would you say is that type of advice you would give them?
I think every property is different. Depends on where you are, what
Sure.
towns you're in.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I like to look for opportunity, right, where you can add a little bit of elbow grease to a
Okay.
property.
Okay.
You know, if a property is completely renovated, right, everyone who's in the market for that property is going to pay top dollar.
Yeah.
They're paying retail value for that space. If a property has the ability for you to renovate or do some updates, you can almost force appreciation, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I would look for properties like that
Gotcha.
where it needs a little work, and I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. But if you're buying a nice property that's all renovated, there's nothing to do.
Right.
And if you buy a property that maybe it's slightly less expensive, but now you got to go in and you clean it up, and you might get extra cash in that building off of your labor. You know?
Right. Okay. I got you. So for you, it's more if you're somehow willing to put a little elbow grease in to the
Mhm.
home,
Mhm.
then you're more likely to actually get better growth on it in terms of overall like
Yeah.
value, right?
Yeah.
Like because if you get a finished product, more than likely all the value has been kind of put into it, and now you're buying it at its max price,
Yeah.
you know, and then you're competing with everybody in that market to try to get it. So you're definitely going to pay more than what they're asking for because there might be multiple, uh, people submit their
Yeah.
offers,
Yeah.
So I guess I have one last question for you. I genuinely have to say, like, your information right now, like, I'm so fucking hyped to go home and just like review it over and over like an audiobook. So
Sweet.
I genuinely appreciate it. I guess what I'll wrap up with, and I think the best way I can say it is, in everything that you've done so far, what
Mhm.
would be your proudest moment? Like the first thing that comes to mind where you're like, wow, that like brings you genuine joy.
Yeah. I'm really proud of myself and the work that I put in to change myself, like as many times as I did. You know, everything from being like young and crazy to becoming like an older man, everything from being in bad relationships to becoming good in my relationships. Like I feel like I went through my life and I continue to do this piece by piece, and like a key in the until you figure out the perfect
Yeah.
key for the keyhole. Like every time I see a problem with the way I act or the way I behave or the way I treat others in my life, if it needs to be fixed, I go to work on it. And man, I have grown personally so much. I don't have everything that I want, but man, I'm also not where I used to be at all. And like the Tony Robbins says like progress is happiness, and I progress, and it makes me so happy. Like it makes me so fulfilled to just look back on my life and be like, wow, I went from getting evicted to having all these properties. I went from never doing sales to doing sales. I went from, like being a barber and an auto body man to doing what I'm doing now, like an investor and a
Right.
realtor and like developer. I went from, I was kind of like a gangster. I could say I was kind of gangster in my younger days.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
went from that to being how I am now, like super approachable, and like all those things. I'm just proud of myself because I know how hard it is to change. I know how hard it is to like battle life itself. No matter what we say, I see my dad struggle in like just like trying to just in life. He just had a really hard time.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people struggle, and I feel like I've been super, super depressed in my life, super sad. I felt like nothing was going well for me. I felt like I was going to be like a horrible person, a horrible father, and a horrible example. But I just didn't stop, and I worked on myself so much, and I changed myself so much, and I changed my circles so many times, and it makes me super proud of myself, and it makes me believe that maybe I could get myself to believe I could do bigger things faster.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool if you look at my trajectory over the last 20 years. Some people, you meet them and they stay the same, if you meet me 5 years from now, I might be a different person, like for the better.
Right, right.
And that makes me, as far as like being proud of myself, that makes me super proud. You know, I always say like I want to make my mom proud. She's always watching over me. You know, and I don't want to give. I want to make my son proud. Like I don't want to give him an excuse when I'm older. Like he'll never be able to say I didn't try.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Well, as we're wrapping up here, how do people follow you? How do they get in contact with you? Like, if they need any type of realtor help, like, how do they reach you?
Yeah, so you can find me on all my social media, and then I guess I'll share my phone number at that time with you if I think you're like if it makes sense. But if you want any advice or anything like that, just message me on all social media platforms. I still do them all myself, so that's pretty direct access to me. And if you ever want to do real estate, I would be happy to help. Just as long as you're not a super crazy person, right? I'm to the point where I don't have to deal with everyone, but obviously, if your goal is to grow through real estate and grow through investments and grow through just building yourself up and growing your like personal income flow, like that's my goal too. So I always think like let's go together because they say like birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for people that are trying to grow because that's what I'm doing too. I feel like that never stops for me. So if that's what you're into, and yeah, you can find me on all my social media channels.
Nice. Well, David, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, man. All right, everybody. David, I will put all the social media all over while he was talking. You guys will get it. Make sure you reach out to him if you're trying to buy a home in Massachusetts. I would assume you're anywhere you want to buy a home.
United States,
yes. If you're
Dubai,
that's it. This man can help
England,
you.
I don't care, right? Anywhere.
That's it. All right, everybody. Peace.
Peace. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you, bro. That was awesome.